What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, and this is part 3, disc 3 of my breakdown, review, thoughts on the Frank Zappa Apostrophe 50th Anniversary Super Deluxe release, the 5-disc version. I've already talked about the first 2 discs. Now I'm going to talk about disc 3, which is the second half of the Colorado Springs, Colorado concert in 1974, March of 74. That winter tour that had not yet been released. We had not yet had anything from this tour in the Zappa catalog. This was a tour that was after the fall 73 tour. Jeff Simmons sat in on like that last Roxy show, that like private show, and made the album. He stuck around, plays harmonica and some rhythm guitar, some little lead every once in a while. Bruce Fowler is there, still around, and then you got pretty much the core of the band. You got Humphrey and Thompson on drums, Underwood, Tom Fowler on bass, Duke, Brock, and then of course Zappa. So yeah, this is the second half of the show. There are 10 songs on this disc. Let's go through them. It is fantastic. Yeah, it is fantastic. This is my favorite year, 74. My favorite tour is that summer fall one. It's becoming just overall my favorite year, regardless of the tour. The releases have been fantastic, and this is right up there with like Zappa Eerie, with Stage 2, everything else they've released from 74. This opens up with Dupree's Paradise, just the song. The Dupree's Paradise intro, which is that George, dun 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 dun, bum, but the hook into George doing solo stuff, into a bunch of jamming. That closes disc 2. Disc 1 opens up Dupree's proper. A lot of little interesting changes in this tour's version of Dupree's. Like they kind of run through the main head and then almost like stop almost before we get a really, really hyper loud version of the do 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 do, and then we go into solo section. It's not a very smooth transition. We get a Brock solo, Fowler bass solo, and then I think a Simmons solo. I think this is the one that's on harmonica, right? Including, I think Simmons does some talking. I'm pretty sure it's this one. Yeah. Simmons. Then I think we get a Fowler trombone solo, and then Frank finally gets a solo. My big hope for this was earlier in this tour, the vamp for Frank's guitar solo was the opening bass line from Carolina Hardcore Ecstasy, which wouldn't drop until the Bongo Fury tour as a song. He's not doing it on this show. He's already given up on that. He now has the just do 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 do. So the vibe of the solo is different. It's not less like go bare, build things up from scratch. There's kind of some momentum from the beginning. Awesome solo, really interesting. I think the Duprees are always just Frank's on a playground, exploring, having fun, just getting out all of his guitar ideas. Not one of the best Duprees. I mean, there were better Duprees, both earlier in 73, later in 74, but it's a Dupree, so it's pretty fantastic. Then we get 2 of the greatest things ever. We get an 11-minute plus version of Andy, which is called Is There Anything Good Inside of You? Essentially, all the pieces you recognize from Andy are there, but the way it comes across is it's almost as if like a dancer is learning like this long dance routine and has like the first section and the second section and the third section down, but they're not really good at the like transitions. Like it's still kind of like, okay, now I got to pivot to this part. The pivoting to the next part, you can see the hinges. You can see like where the transitions are made. So it doesn't quite have that sort of just smoothness that the final Andy kind of needs to be successful because of all the sort of left turns and U-turns and stuff that's going on. But it's an interesting listen. Early on in the opening, I think the most important part is that awesome like drum pattern, that dun dun, that thing, dun dun, that craziness is there from the beginning, and it is the thread that binds everything together. Early on, there's a George Duke keyboard riff that's kind of behind the drum riff that reminds me of Alan Parsons Project's, I think it's Sirius, right? That's the opening track on Eye of the Sky. Has that sort of like weird sports arena type vibe, which is really cool. Very low key vibe. In that part in the middle where they do the da-na-na, da-na-na-na-na, that's played on harmonica. Simmons is dropping that a harmonica, which is pretty cool. And then we get a nice long guitar solo. The guitar solo is through the dun 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 dun. And at first, Frank really just seems like he's like trying to figure things out. And then about halfway through the solo, how long is it? It's about 4 minutes long. It really just starts to click. And you can see Frank's like dancing around the drum patterns and coming in and out. And there's a little more swag in there, a little more personality. Really, really interesting, and just absolutely fascinating listen. The only real big difference is at the end when we get the Andy, we just go into this loose funk section in which Nappy's just like improvising some stuff, very kind of a Pygmy Twilight meets cheapness type thing before we get a closing jam. That's a pretty sweet closing jam with a nice little solo. 11 minutes, they're fascinating. Then we go into a Florentine Pogan, which is the same as the one we know and love, but twice as fast. It's just a double speed Florentine Pogan. It's all there. It's really interesting. It sounds great, but it just doesn't have that, I guess, that majesty that the original has at that slower tempo. But the best part might be this really short George Duke keyboard solo in the middle that sounds just awesome. But yeah, it's just a really fun, fast version. There's an extra set of lyrics at the very end before we go right into Kung Fu. We get a version of Kung Fu, a song that by the end of the year would just be gone. So we get that segment. Then we get a pretty standard run in 73, 74. We get a Penguin in Bondage and to Mercy Dween, Dog Breath Variations, Uncle Meat. The Penguin solo, fantastic, pretty straightforward, bluesy, intense, focused. Like, I'm not saying it's one of his best solos, but there's something about the guitar playing that is kind of just perfect. Like, it's exactly what you want a Penguin to bring. Frank delivers perfectly in the rhythm section, and it's just great guitar solo. And then just listening to the band through Tamershi, Dog Breath, Uncle Meat, the 3-drummer attack, Tom Fowler on bass, Duke on keyboards. It's a phenomenal listen. This band is just absolutely ridiculous. Uncle Meat ends the main set. And then for an encore, we get Redunzel, of all things. The 73 version with the really hectic, sort of fast-paced intro, the short little guitar solo from Frank. Pretty nice guitar solo. Very kind of just very swinging, very uplifting, relatively short. Then we run into the middle section of Redunzel before we finish it, as we typically would finish Redunzel with like a nice George Duke keyboard solo. So a nice Redunzel, and then that drops immediately into the medley of King Kong. We're right into King Kong with the diddly 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 diddly, right, like the 78 version. We start into that. We get a little bit more of King Kong. Then we get a fantastic keyboard solo. Spacey, out there. Duke sounds amazing. He's just top of his game every time he gets a chance to solo. Right as he's finishing his solo, we would go right into right into a Chunga's Revenge. Frank takes his solo in Chunga Revenge. Kind of a low-key entrance into it, but still pretty focused, building intensity almost immediately. Rhythmically, there's just so much going on with like what the drummers and Ruth and Duke are bringing to like the rhythm section. And Frank was really just kind of like bouncing along with them. And it's really, I don't know if it's an intense solo, but it's just a really well played, kind of fun, upbeat, energetic solo. I think the solo's about 3 minutes long, a little more than that. And then we go into Son of Mr. Green Jeans as the coda to this medley. Frank's still playing the melody. We get towards the end of it, we get 4 instances of the hook thrown in to finish the things out. Oh, we get the hook thrown in, I think, as we're playing Son of Mr. Green Jeans. So it's like dun 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 dun, and then like a little portion of the melody, and then dun 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 again, a more little portion of the melody. Very, very messed with, tweaked, manipulated version of Son of Green Jeans. But yeah, it's all fantastic. I think it sounds fantastic for a Winter 74 show that we didn't even know existed until recently. The performances are great. The band is epic. No complaints at all. There's still a whole other show to go from what I consider to be the greatest tour Frank ever played. But Disc 1, I've reviewed. Disc 2, fantastic. Disc 3, fantastic. I got some comments from people saying that Disc 3 might actually be better than Disc 2. And with that Andy, that really weird version of Andy, the really fast Florentine Pogan, the Redunzel, just the playing in general, maybe that's the case. But I also think Disc 1 is pretty epic, at least of the show. Disc 2, the first part of the show. That Village is so much fun. The Don't You Ever Watch with the horn solos at the end. The Approximate, which might be the best Approximate. Yeah, not really sure which of the ones is better, 2 or 3, but they're 100% worth checking out. And that's all I got for this. I highly recommend it. I got 2 more discs to go. Now that I've done this, I can go listen to disc 4, and I'm going to go do that. Leave your comments on this. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and peace. Talk to you later.